teach?
Taught for 2 years.
Really?
And then at that point, it was a cinder block room. The brass were just being brass kids, and I would go home and like my ears would, and I'm like, I got this massive headache at the end, like halfway through the year for the rest of the year, and I'm like, I'm exhausted. This is physically draining, and I think I'm going deaf. And so I started at the end of the second year having to actually put some earplugs in because I'm like, this is not good.
That sucks though. Teaching with earplugs. Ugh.
Yep. And now they have different things that will just bring the volume down that weren't available, in 20 some years ago. But yeah. So, and also the other part of the contract that I was told mid-year. By the way, you're going to do pep band for every event. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was part of that. Oh yeah, now you need to go to this other room that has all the pep band music. I'm like, we didn't even have it. And so I'm like, okay. And I had to organize all that stuff and then figure out, because again, being a guitar player, I wasn't in pep band with you. So I didn't know what that was all about. And so I had to lean on like the drummers to be like, hey, make sure we're starting at the right tempo if I'm not giving you the right beat. Because they knew, and they were really very helpful. But yeah, so I mean, there was so many things that I was having to ramp up super fast, not having some of that experience. And then it became, then I was told, oh, there are these parades, and you have to go and call all the kids and bring them in for these parades. Really? And it's like, I have vacation, I need to go. Sorry, you can't. You can't go on vacation. And I'm like, okay. So I went and did the parades, and then that next year I was like, I don't want to keep doing this.
Well, you did not have a good experience.
No, I don't think that it was a super amazing experience, but also what ended up occurring with all these compounding things, the joy that I had making music, sharing music, went away. Yeah. Because it became, this is a job. This is, busy, you're working really hard, kind of out by yourself with nobody else to kind of help you. And if you were trying to teach that kid, we need to go and work on 5 different major scales, and they got 2, and then their parent comes in. Why are you, railing on my kid? Because I'm simply asking them to do 5 out of the 12. It's not a lot.
It's not even half.
And if they're a junior, they need to have known these by 9th grade.
Yeah.
And they had a different situation with their growing up with different teachers, but I'm trying to help them move on at this point.
Right.
And well, you better not give my kid a low grade. And it's just like all this. So at that point, I ended up doing, I don't want to, it's not really juries or anything, but it was like, here, I'm going to tell you the first week of the month, the last week of the month, you're going to be tested on this B section. So if I were you, please work on that. I'm telling you, almost 3 weeks in advance. And then they would go into a room and they would just have to say their name and play the thing, and I had a tape recorder playing. And so then when that parent comes in, I go and play the tape. This is what your child sounds like. And they've had 25 days to prepare. This really is the grade that they're going to get.
Yeah.
And we have hard evidence on it. So it's like, it became just
almost a legal battle.
Yeah, I just was like, no, this is not what I kind of want to do. And then I literally had a car accident where somebody hit my car while I was shopping. And so then at that point I had this newer car that I needed to repair. I had to call my insurance company, and that adjuster came by. And I was just kind of watching them. I'm like, why are you so happy? You're doing your work. And then they were like, well, I get to talk to all these different people, and I get to do this and drive around, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, give me your card. I'm going to go and find out if there's openings. And then I worked at Progressive for 5 years, doing auto claims and writing estimates, and then settling injury claims, and then moved on to American Family after that.
And making more money?
Oh yeah, because at the Catholic school, I mean, I also had a second job as a caretaker for a senior living complex. So I was the fix-it guy, I was the garbage man, I was the maintenance guy, all that stuff, because I couldn't even afford to pay rent.
Yeah.
Because I was making, like 1999, 2000, I was making $19,500 a year. So I needed that job to be able to pay for food.
Yeah.
And then at that point, the next year I got like $1,500 raise. So I was like, oh wow, I might be able to get the nice bread this year. So I was like, nah, I need to do something else, and that's what. And then I suddenly have been doing this for a long time, and I'm happy doing it. It's different every day, but also at the same
well,
time.
you're like my buddy Keith. When I came back to Bismarck, Keith Grotwald's family owned Hatch's Hallmark in the mall.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And it eventually evolved into Lee's Hallmark, and Keith eventually became the president of the company because his parents were retiring,
Yeah.
But and he and I played in bands, a dance band, Celebration, forever. 17 years, one of the most popular bands. It was us and Fire and Shame.
Yeah.
We were the two hot bands in town, playing all the dances. But I learned from him that the music was his outlet.
Yeah.
He made his living with the card store, but he just loved playing. And there was a time in town here where he was the busiest drummer in town. He was playing in like 3 bands, and but running the card store.
Yeah.
But he had the money to support his hobbies,
Mm-hmm.
drumming.
Right.
And you could just see at Christmas time, because Christmas time, a card store, that's your busy time, Christmas crazy. He'd come to the gig, wound up tight as a kite, and by the 3rd set, he was like,
Yeah.
he was old Keith again. So you're kind of that way.
Yeah.
You're making your bread and butter doing the insurance thing, and it's something you like, and you must like the people you work with, but then you can just enjoy your passion.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So now, kind of getting back into when you come back from California, and at that point you had realized that you needed to make some changes. You still had all the contacts around town to be able to go and say, "Hey, I want to go get another group together."
No, because I was in Fargo.
Oh, you were.
That's
okay.
where all my contacts were.
Okay.
I knew everybody in Fargo, and I was gigging a lot in Fargo because I was there for 5 years.
Okay.
So I came back here. I really didn't know anybody, but I went through Hatch's Hallmark and ran into Keith, who was working.
Okay.
He said, "Oh, you went to GIT? You're back in town. We got this band, and we're thinking of adding a guitar player. You want to come and hang out with us for a bit?" Well, yeah, I'd love to,
Yeah.
So that's how that came to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really had no contacts because in high school, I had a band with some guys, but not like Fargo where you're working. I mean, you were really working with guys all the time, and the club scene. You'd play the club, Monday through Saturday. And in Fargo we'd play a club in Grand Forks. Tuesday through Saturday. Yeah. Play the club till 1 o'clock, drive home, get up, go to school.
Yep.
Go back up, play the gig,
Yeah, and I think that's really a very clear explanation of how Fargo Moorhead is so different than Bismarck and Mandan, because they had the colleges there, so you had the people to go and populate the bars, and then also Mary, University of Mary is just kind of out of the way, and people aren't going to be always coming in every day.
Well, and the times, when I was playing in Fargo, disco was just coming, and bars were starting to put in DJs.
Yeah,
and that was we kind of saw the writing on the wall. We were still popular, we were still playing a lot, but like my sons, who are both professional musicians, have never played a wedding dance. They've never played a gig in a bar where people come to dance.
Yeah.
And that's all we did was play for people to come and dance.
Yeah.
And once the DJ thing started hitting, you could just, why the bride and groom would hire a DJ for $300 or they'd hire a Celebration for $800. Well, it's some pretty easy math there.
Yeah.
And so now we're just playing in bars where there's no dancing, but they come to see us play our tunes.
Yeah.
We call them shows now.
Sure. Yeah. No. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So that all came to be that way, and then throughout multiple conversations, not just even this week, but years ago, your name comes up all the time as a he is absolutely a person of influence on the music scene in Bismarck. Like if something is going on, you know about it, and that if somebody is gonna need something or need some advice, people come to you a lot.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of those experiences when somebody came to you that you maybe on a peripheral level maybe knew, but then they're like, I need some help on this, or because that I just can't even remember. There's just been so many times when your name has come up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I didn't know he was a part of this or whatever.
Well, again, it goes back to by the time I came back to Bismarck, Scott Prebus was at the University of Mary taking over the jazz program, and he is really the guy that had his finger on the pulse of music in Bismarck, because his attitude was, because he's from Chicago, and brilliant musician, brilliant professor, but came from Chicago where he was working with some big name bands, and he comes out to Bismarck, North Dakota, but his attitude was, if this is going to happen, I'm going to have to make it happen. And he brought that to Bismarck. He needed a guitar player, and he met me and knew that I went to GIT, and he knew that I could play, and he knew that I knew jazz. So we hit it off.
Yeah.
So really, Scott Prebus was the guy who had the major influence in this town, and he started this thing called the Great Plains Jazz Society. He started that. And ran it for many, many years, and I was part of it, I was part of the gang that made those things happen, and we all took our turn as president.
Sure.
So that's how the influence came to be. But then when you become the band director of Bismarck High, you're sort of at the epicenter of what's happening musically in town, as was Scott Prebus out of the university. He was at the epicenter of it too, because he was making it happen.
Right.
So that's sort of, it was no great talent on my part. It's just I was the right guy in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And that's how things kind of happened.
I know, because I remember this being probably a freshman, 89, 90 or something like that, and coming to you and being like, I do want to know more about jazz, and what do I do? And then you were like, go out to the University of Mary, talk to Scott Prebus, and get something and tell him you want a real book.
Oh,
so
yeah.
At that point, I'm like, but what's a real book?
I'll go find out.
And then I'm like, okay. So then I'm going up as this little kid. I think at that time I probably still didn't even have my permit, so I had to maybe have my parents drive me out there and track him down and be like, I need a real book. And he's like, yes, you do. And then at that point, he goes in the far back, and it's nothing that's up available. You can see it's in the far back.
Yeah.
This is totally the illegal. We've copied this how many times?
Yeah.
And then at that point, he's like, it's this much. My mom had to write a check or something like that. And then I'm like, oh, this is it. And he's like, this is what you need. And then you got to go and listen.
Yeah, it's the Bible.
You got to go find these songs and listen to them and look at that and try to figure it out. And I'm like, okay, and it just, I still have it,
Oh,
it
yeah.
is well worn, but
I've got 2 of them.
Yeah, and I got versions.
But right now I've got about 18 of them.
yeah, absolutely. And so that was kind of my first experience of, okay, if I'm going to learn jazz, this is how I can, an entry point for me.
Yeah.
Because just listening to a record, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, oh, I can see the changes. I can start now to figure out what's going on, learn the melody. But here's where the rub on, because I didn't know anything else. I got married to the book, and I couldn't separate myself from that. It still is a problem today, because up to that point, I was through elementary school and junior high. I had been taking lessons with different teachers, and they all were like book. And so I was sight reading, and I could sight read really well at that point. But then at that point, getting away from the book and then hearing is, that's where my deficit was. And, it has been a lifelong issue where I feel like still I can see something, I can go and see the sequence of something or the form, and then go and read it, and then turn around and be like, I get halfway and I'm like, what was that? because it's not registering.
Well,
so that's why I mean that
yeah.
like that half of classical and half rock experience
Yeah.
really probably helped you.
Yeah. Well, but it was the drop the needle thing.
Yeah.
That's all I had. That was the only way to learn, was to drop the needle. That's how everybody in town learned how to play the tunes. And you know, we played dances, and so we needed to learn how to play Smoke on the Water. And you did it by going no, you know, you'd spend hours in front of the stereo just dropping that needle. That's how our ears got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Did you feel like you had, thinking back now, really strong relative pitch early in your life?
No.
That you were like, oh,
No.
I can kind of hear that, or
No,
you had to kind of work?
I got better and better and better and quicker. You know, and by college, we were still dropping the needle. That's how we learned the new tunes.
Yeah.
And you'd still, so I was still listening real hard. And even when I came back and I was playing in the group celebration, we would rehearse once a week, and we would learn the tunes by just picking them out. We didn't go out and buy the music. You could order the music, but that took 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And the dance is Saturday, you know, and the bride wanted to hear this song, so okay, well, figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I have a really good ear. I can. Was Adam Roberts around in your class?
He was. I think maybe a freshman or a sophomore when I was a senior.
He is like a phenomenal bass player.
Yeah.
His ears are this big. He can hear anything.
Yeah.
And when I would play in the day, those 7 Seas gigs, when I played jazz gigs with him, if I didn't know the tune, all I'd have to do is close my eyes and listen to him. Because he would lead me right through every chord. Not intentionally, but because he was being a good bass player.
Yeah.
That's what good bass players do.
Yeah.
And because I dropped the needle so many times, I could figure it out, you know, where I was at, what the changes were.
Yeah.
And that's a real gift. I was always intimidated in jazz bands and situations where I had to read Legally Blonde, you know. Now, you know, you get your college degree, and you know, you spend all those years reading scores and being a band director. Yeah, you pretty much start nailing rhythms, and you know, so yeah, I can read pretty well nowadays.
Yeah.
It was interesting because at GIT, I was one of the few guys that could read.
Okay.
And we found each other. There were some of us that wanted to be studio musicians, and we found each other because we all had college degrees and we could all kind of read, you know.
Yeah.
And in sight reading class, we dominated.
Sure.
you know, with the guys that were just coming out of high school, never been to college, they were just dead in the water with that kind of stuff. But boy, could they shred.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.